tents that they gave me boot camp.
So your height didn't have as much to do
No, it
with
didn't have anything to do with that.
That was just an
they said I
excuse
couldn't go to
watching.
submarine school because I was too tall.
Yeah.
But the tech school, there wasn't any height regulation there. Well, anyway,
the taller the better. You don't need a ladder, I guess.
Is it got to run a little ways before it starts?
Is it going, Bryan?
It's ready to go.
It's going.
So anyway, as I'd come out of the water, why these people would be saying, how could you hold your breath so long? And I'd say, well, I swim a lot and I can stay down a long time. But Commander Eddie was laughing when I told him this story. So anyway, he asked me what my family thought about me going in submarines, and I said, oh, they think it's great, but actually they didn't really. I hadn't discussed it with them really. But anyway, after about a half hour, he says, well, I think you'd make a good submariner. He said, I'm going to recommend that you be sent up to New London to sub school. He said, but first, we're going to have a doctor give you a physical exam and make sure you have 20/20 vision in that right eye. And he said, and as far as your height is concerned, he said, there's no limit about height on submarines. I'd never heard of anything. The guy just must have made that up. So anyway, I went back to thanked him and went back to the school. And a couple of days later, they withdrew me from the classes at that point because they said, well, if you don't want to go through this school's tough enough for people who want to without making somebody do it who doesn't want to. And so then the doctor came there and he gave me the physical and put me down as 20/20 in both eyes. And everything else was fine. And so then my orders came through to report to Great Lakes, which was the big training center there north of Chicago. And Great Lakes we were running a company a day through San Diego, 160 men. They were running 1,000 men a day entering boot camp there. So they really had thousands and thousands of men in training at one point. At any given point, they had all these men in training there. And so he sent me up there to wait until we got what they called a draft, which was a group of men that were going to the same place, and that they would have a petty officer who did nothing but this, escorting people to where they needed to go. Then they'd have a petty officer take us up there. They weren't going to send the petty officer up there with just me. They wanted to wait till they got some more men. Well, we waited a week. Now we're about into February. In fact, we were into February. And I said, if I'm just going to keep waiting here to go to sub school, I'd like to get the leave to go home. I wanted to go see Grandma and Russ. So I went over to the chaplain, and I told the chaplain that I really wanted to come home and see my family. I had this new baby. And so then he told me, okay, go see Lieutenant so-and-so and tell him I sent you over there. So I went over to the lieutenant's office, and he listened to me, and he said, now where's your home? And I said, well, it's near Phoenix, Arizona. And he said, what do you mean near Phoenix? Where'd you live? And I said, well, actually, I grew up in Mesa. And he said, oh, well, do you know where Chandler is? And I said, well, certainly. Well, that's my home, it's Chandler, it's Lieutenant. And so we sat there and chatted a bit about the Valley of the Sun. And then he said, now, what was it you wanted? And I said, well, I'd like to go home. I'm waiting here, no telling how long. And I'd like to just go home and see my family before I go to sub school. And so he said, well, all right, let me see what the situation is. If they're not ready, doesn't look like they're going to ship you out in the next few days, well, I'll give you a leave. He got on the phone and made some calls, and he said, well, looks like we can do it. So he said, I'm going to give you 9 days leave and 2 days traveling time. Well, 2 days. It took 51 hours to get from Chicago to here on the train. That was more than 2 days. But I wasn't going to argue with him. I figured that's still going to give me 7 days at home, approximately. And so he made out the orders, and I stashed my stuff away there that I didn't need to bring home with me. And I didn't have any money, because what I'd done was, the first paycheck I got in boot camp was like $50 or whatever, 40, and I'd sent most of that home to Grandma, because I didn't need much money. Buy a little toothpaste and a little shoe polish. I didn't need much money. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't need money for that kind of stuff, where the other guys did. So anyway, I had sent the money to her. Well, now, when the next payday came, why, it had me down as no money, because the Navy charges you for your clothes. The Army didn't do that, but the Navy did. And so they had taken out of my pay then for my shoes and all my clothes had been taken out of my pay. And so the next payday I was in Chicago, and there was still no money, because I still hadn't got all the money for my clothes. And so by the time I'm ready to come home, I had to call Grandma, collect from Chicago, and have her wire me some money to buy a ticket. And so, now she was getting her allotment money. She was getting $80 a month as the allotment. But see, 22 of that came out of my money, plus I'd send her extra money whenever I had some extra money. I'd send it to her. So anyway,
what was the allotment?
Well, the allotment was what the wives of servicemen were allowed, $50 a month, and if you had a child, you got 30 more. And if you had 2 children, you got another 20, and so on. That's what the allotment was.
Okay.
But I didn't get my $52 because they took 22 of that out of part of the allotment money, which they did from everybody's pay. Well, anyway, she sent me the money, and I got my ticket and got on the train.
How much was the ticket?
Oh, probably $20 or something like that.
$20 for a train from Chicago to
Round trip.
Round trip?
Several days.
It wasn't much, because she didn't send me very much money. She didn't have very much. So anyway, I got home and then stayed 7 days. Well, they were having this bad snowstorm back in Chicago. We're hearing this on the radio and seeing in the paper, worst they'd had in 50 years. Just a blizzard back there, and everything was snowed in, and trains were stopped and all this. So anyway, I looked at the schedule, and in order to get back to the base, the Great Lakes, at the time that I was supposed to be there, I'd have to get there actually 21 hours before. There was no way to time it. The trains only ran every so often. And so if I was going to get there before the time I was supposed to be there, then I had to take a train which actually is going to get me there 21 hours early, almost a full day. So I'm thinking, heck with that, I'll take the next train and I'll be 3 hours late, but not 21 hours early. I'll have an extra day here. And so that's what I did. Well, when we got back on the train, that's when I met Mama Rose, my grandmother, for the first time. Met her there in Kansas City. And that's when she said, okay, now, what would you like to drink before we order our meal? We're eating there at the train station. And I said, I don't want to drink anything. Oh, come on, you can have a drink. Don't you want some coffee or something? You know I don't drink coffee. Oh, you're a big boy. You don't have to do what your dad tells you. You can drink coffee if you want to. Well, step-grandpa Dick, Harold, was sitting there at the table too, and he listened to a little bit of that, and finally he said, Rose, will you leave him alone? You know he doesn't drink coffee, and you know he doesn't drink alcohol, so quit bothering him. Just order let him order what he wants and leave him alone. And I think that's probably the only time Grandpa Dick ever told her off, because she wasn't the kind of woman that you told off, unless you're ready for a 30-minute fight.
So I got away with it.
So anyway, but that is the only time I saw them. And then Grandpa Dick died in 1957 or somewhere in there, step-grandpa. And then she did come out to Phoenix when Patty was married in 1958. So I did see her then. But
She was going to the temple.
But those are the only two times that I ever saw her, was that one.
Tell them about her going to the
Well,
temple.
that's down the line a ways.
Okay.
But anyway, that 40 minutes or 45 minutes there at the train station in Kansas City. And then when she came out here to Pat's weddings, the only two times I ever saw her. Because then, well, no, then she did, when she was 95, she came out and lived with Grandpa Harris. But in my growing up years, I had never seen her till I saw her when I was in the Navy there. And then I didn't see her again until 1958, and then I didn't see her again. Well, I guess that was the last time. Well, then she moved out here in 1970 or somewhere along in there, when she moved out here, and then of course we saw her until she died. But anyway, when I was coming to Mesa, we got off the train, and I had sent a wire or some telegram or something to Grandma, because it only cost like 50 cents. And I'd sent it telling her when I'd be in the train station there on my way home. Because again, I had never seen her. And so I got off, and I'm walking around the train station there. And I'd seen some pictures of Mama Rose, but they were old pictures. I really didn't know what she looked like. And so here's this pretty gray-haired lady, just walking around, kind of looking like this. So I walked over to her and I said, "Are you my grandma?" And she said, "Well, no, I'm not, but I sure wished I was. See, I was in my Navy uniform." And I was good looking in those days. I looked a lot like Scott. I was really good looking. And she said, "I wished I was." And I said, "Well, I've never seen my grandma before, and she was going to meet me here. And well, I hoped you were her." And she said, "Well, like I said, I wished I was." And but she didn't get there for whatever reason. She didn't get to the station, and I had to get on the train and come on. Anyway, when I got back, when I got to Kansas City and over to St. Louis, that's the way the train ran, here was snow. You're looking out the train window, and it's just like you're going down a canal, no water in it. I mean, the snow is just stacked up so high beside the tracks that you can't, most of the time you can't see what's out there at all. All you can see is the bank of snow. And this train, you're up fairly high in the train seats, but that's how high that snow was. They'd apparently gone with the snowplow train, just blew it up to the sides, and just, you're like going down a canyon. And the trains were way off schedule. So there were two SPs, shore patrolmen, which is the Navy's policemen. They were on the train, and they were coming around and checking papers, guys. And so when they came by, they said, "Do you have your leave papers, or are you on leave?" And I said, "Yeah." And they, "Well, do you have your papers?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I got them out and looked. Well, he said, "You're okay," because it wasn't time for me to be back yet. And I said, "Well, I've got a problem here." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Well, this train's late, and I'm supposed to be at Great Lakes at such and such a time," told him. "And this train's not going to get me there. I won't even be to Chicago by the time that time comes." And I said, "Can you write me a note stating that the trains are late, and then I can take that with me to justify," because I said, "I'm going to be 5 or 6 hours late." Now I say I figured 3, but now the trains are late, so it's going to be 5 or 6. And so one of them said, well, yeah, we can do that, because the trains are held up. So they gave me a note saying that the trains were delayed. So now I go on into Chicago, get on the train. I was supposed to have been there at 11 o'clock the night before, and now I'm coming in there at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, so I was that much late. So as I get off the train and I knew Chicago pretty well by that time, I got off the train, got on a streetcar, and the streetcars ran north, and they ceased to be streetcars. They were like elevated trains or subways. And so it went right through the Naval Training Center. They had Navy on both sides of the tracks were the Navy Great Lakes Training Center. So I got off, and I walked in the office, and this guy on the desk, probably a yeoman, he looked at my papers and he said, well, you're late. You're over leave or whatever he called it. And he says, have a seat there. Lieutenant so-and-so is going to need to see you. So I said, all right. So I showed him the paper that I had from the SPs, but that really didn't justify it because trains were 3 hours late and I'm 8 or 9 hours late. So anyway, pretty soon they called me into the lieutenant's office. So he looks and I show him the paper and he said, no. He said, that you could have been here at 2 o'clock this morning. The trains are only like 3 hours late. So he said, no, you're AWOL. So he said, I'm going to have to send you over to the AWOL barracks. And so just out of the clear blue, I just said, now wait a minute, Lieutenant. The only one that can send me to that barracks because of these papers is the officer that issued me these papers for my leave. And so I'll be glad to come back and talk to him when he's back here, but he's the one that has to authorize me to be sent over to the PAL barracks.
You just made that up, didn't you?
Yeah, I just made it up.
It's a wonder I didn't have bleeding ulcers
And
the
so-
whole time he was gone.
And so he said, well, all right. He said, then just go on back to your regular barracks and we'll be in touch with you. And I said, okay, thank you. And I went back to my barracks and I never, ever heard another word. Never, nothing. And so now I get back in my barracks and here are these guys, you lucky devil. We've been shoveling snow ever since you left here. All these guys that were in there waiting, and even the guys who were still in training, they had them all out there with snow shovels. Here was snow piled on every lawn area, wherever, 10 feet high. Just cuts going down through on the sidewalks. Boy, we've been working out here. And I said, well, I had it pretty tough. I said, the temperature one of those days got clear down to 75. I said, I chided him a little bit about it. There was a guy there in that barracks that played the guitar, and he's the first time I ever heard a guitar played like that. The second time I ever heard it was when those BYU guys stayed at our house there when they'd come down here to do a play for us, or some kind of musical program. This guy, when he played the guitar, he hit individual notes. It wasn't just chords. He was playing the notes. And I mean, just fascinated me, and I thought, this guy is going to end up in radio, because you weren't thinking in terms of television in those days. This guy's going to end up really somebody. Well, I don't know if he survived the war. I don't know what happened to him. But every chance I got, if he had that guitar out, I was over there listening, because it's just music, really, really good music. And but anyway, then they decided that, I had a nosebleed. And so I went over to the doctor, and one of the guys says, you better not go over there, because if you go over there, they're going to put you in sick bay, and then you're going to miss this draft that goes out when we because he was gonna go to sub school too. And so you'll miss it, and then you'll be here for another 2 months waiting. And I said, but I need to have something done with this. It just bleeds too much. And I had a lot of nosebleeds when I was young. Not from fights, well, a few from fights, but that wasn't the reason. And so I went over to the doctor, and I told him, now, I hope this isn't gonna taste long, because I've gonna be catching the train to New London, Connecticut, to sub school. And so he said, well, then let's try something on you. And so he put this swabs up my nose, and boy, it just burned like the dickens. But I never had another nosebleed for like 3 or 4 years. Never again through the Navy, and not even for 2 years after I got out of the Navy. I never had another nosebleed.
How was your sense of smell though after that?
It was, well,
Everything's-
Grandma
everything's
says
like
it's
It's
not
never
too
been
good.
very good.
But anyway, but whatever he put up there was iodine or something, but it healed that right up, or probably cauterized it and stopped it, because it just was like magic.
Toxic waste.
Yeah.
And one of the,
Illegal in
Killed
36
everything.
states.
and one of these guys had said, well, I'll tell you what, if you go over there to that doctor and he doesn't put you in the hospital, when you do get out of there, I'll buy you a case of beer. And I said, well, I don't know what I'd do with a case of beer, but just save it for somebody else, and you'll see. And anyway, I went right back to the barracks. He put that swab my nose out, and it stopped the bleeding, and I was back there in an hour. I was back to the barracks. Well, then, pretty soon, the word came down that, okay, there's 7 of you that need to go to New London to sub school. Now they're putting 1,000 guys a day through that place, and I've been there, counting the leave time and all, I've been there for a month and a half, and there's still only accumulated 6 other guys. And I'm wondering, is this really a good choice? How come nobody else wants in this but me? But I still wasn't gonna back out. And so anyway, one day we got on the train and had this petty officer as our guide, and he took us to New London. Got off the train, and the train there pulls right up into the Navy base. Just actually pulls right in and then backs back out. But they took us right in. We didn't even have to ride a bus or anything. The train took us right in there. And so we get off, and Chief Spritz is right there waiting for us. And Chief Spritz is the toughest man that I've ever known, and acted it too. And he had the power of life and death over you. In fact, Saddam is a sissy alongside of Chief Spritz. Anyway, this guy we had to line up every morning, because we weren't ready to start classes immediately. We had a bunch of tests and things to take before we actually began subclasses. And the subclass ran for 6 weeks, and then they had about 2 weeks that the teachers weren't teaching, and then start another one. So you only had classes start every 8 weeks. Well, so we get in there, and you're lined up out there, and Spritz goes up and down the line, and the guys that are lined up are not the ones that are in school. They're the guys who are waiting to get into school. And so during that 8 weeks, they build up enough people, then they're ready to start another batch of classes. And immediately they start to build up another bunch. And so anyway, I got in there, I don't know, maybe the 2nd week or whatever, and there were probably 50 guys or 60 in there in our group. But by the time we started school, then there were like 300 or 400 that were in this group. But every morning we had to line up out there, and he'd go up and down the line. And I mean, he'd pull your shirt collar out like this and look, and if there was at least bit like you hadn't washed that shirt just lately, boy, he'd really chew you out. And he'd tell the yeoman who was walking along with him with a clipboard, put this man down for a dirty shirt collar. Come up, and he came up to me and he said, when'd you last shave? Well, I didn't have any whiskers in those days. I didn't really need to shave till I was 24 or 5 years old. And so when'd you last shave? And I'd say, well, I don't have any whiskers to shave. You shave every day whether you have any whiskers or not. Now, I don't want to see you here again without you being shaved.
Put this man in.
Yeah, put this man down. Yeah, I said,
What did he see on your face?
put him, I don't know, just fuzz, I guess, a little bit of fuzz or something. But put him down here, and so the guy writes my name down. Well, now, during the day then, during the day after he dismisses you, why then you go, and if you don't have a specific test or something to take, and they told you in advance when you took each, you would be taking each of those, why then you go clean the buildings. So we were cleaning crews until we actually started in our tests and got in our classes and that, and then we didn't do that anymore.
Make sure you get to the chaplain part.
Well, and so we would go clean the windows in the barracks and sweep the barracks out and mop them and so forth, however many barracks you could do in a day. And that broke for lunch, and had an hour and a half or so for lunch. Then we're back at it again for 2 or 3 more hours. Then in the evening, why, you could go to the show. They had a theater right there on the base. Or they'd give you a pass to go over to town. That wasn't any problem. But also in there, they're saying, okay, now the following men, they had bulletin boards where they posted this stuff. And you were supposed to look at that board every day, see if your name was on there and what you're supposed to do. Well, one day, we all reported the swimming pool. And you had to, and it was an Olympic-sized pool, and you had to dive in and swim down the length of the pool and all the way back. And you had to do it not floundering either. If you were floundering, why then they made you come back over there in the evenings and they gave you swimming lessons. And then if you still couldn't do it, why then they'd took your name off and you were out of there. You went to a surface ship or went somewhere else, but they wouldn't let you stay in submarines unless you were a good swimmer. Well, we had a Jewish guy there that couldn't swim very well, and this wasn't honest. I'm not telling you this bragging about it. But he knew that he couldn't swim the length of that pool and back. And so he said to me, I'll give you $10 to swim for me. Well, $10 is a lot of money.
A week's pay.
That's a lot of money. That's a month, almost half a month's pay, the way I got it. So I said, okay. So I just went over to the pool when he was supposed to be there. And they said LeClaire, or whatever his name was, said here, dived in the pool, swam the length of the pool and back. They checked him off, and I went on about my business.
Poor guy probably died.
Yeah, he probably drowned.
Swam.
Guy probably drowned someplace. It was my fault. But anyway, that was.
They made him a company lifeguard. And so.
Anyway, then they had us in the air pressure tank. And it's just like one of these huge tanks that the service stations have underground. And only there's a hatch in one end, just like on a ship, that you can open and get in there. And there are some glass windows around it. And they did have like a bench down each side there. Well, it was a bench, but the way the thing was curved, it was designed to set up straight down each side. So they put about 20 of us in there. And then they shut the door. Now, we had our bathing suits on. That's all we had on was our trunks and a pair of tennis shoes with no socks. That's all the clothing we had on. And that was the way it was supposed to be. Now, they start running the pressure up. And they were going to run the pressure up to 50 pounds per square inch. Now, what's the pressure at sea level?
14.7.
Yeah. And so they're going to run it up to 50. Well, we don't feel the first 14.7 because we've been living in it all the time, so we don't notice it. But you notice it when you get up to, you don't have to go to 50. You notice it when you're up to 16, 17. It's like going over the mountains. You've had this happen and you had to pop your ears. Okay, so start running this pressure up. Some guy says, I can't take it. It's hurting my ears so bad. Said, And so they're watching us through the glasses from the outside. And so they stop and they let the pressure back off and they take him out. Now, I don't know what happened to him because I didn't know any of those guys. They just took him out, and whether they gave him another chance or whether they just said, get on the train tomorrow and go
He was summarily
somewhere else.
executed afterwards.
They didn't shoot him, I know that. And then they closed the hatch and they started back up again. Well, they get up there a little ways and some other guy says, oh, this hurts too bad, I gotta get out. And so they lower it back down, they let him out.
You don't get the bends every time they lower it
Well,
back?
no, they don't. You've got to be down a long time to absorb that stuff into your system that you have a problem like that. And so after about the third guy, they would have to lower it down, let him out. I just took it on myself and I said, now, the next guy that says, let me out of here, I'm going to smack you one. I said, I'm tired of this up and down and up and down and up and down. If you don't think you can take it, get out of here. Now, the guys who were running the program, they weren't in there with us. They were outside, so they probably didn't hear what I said. But I said, if you think you can't take it, get out of here. But the rest of us are getting tired of this up and down and up and down. And so nobody got out. They shut the hatch again, and they ran it on up to 50 pounds. Now, there may have been some guys that had blood running out there, but they didn't say anything.
That's why hair grows now in his ears.
You can have blood running out your ears, or you can have
And we
blood
got
running
it
out
up
your
to
nose.
50 pounds, and then it was hot. Well, when they ran that up 50 pounds, it was hot in there. Sweat was just running off of us. That's why they had us in the trunks, swimming suit, nothing else, because I mean, it was trickling off of you.
So are you sure that was water that was
It was
in there?
water trickling off down, and
No sweat from
the
previous
deck was
batches?
down. The deck was just all wet from the sweat coming off of these guys. But then, as they started lowering it, it just fogged up in there. I mean, you couldn't see your hand that far in front of your face, and it got cold. Golly, it was cold in there with the pressure going down, and of course you quit sweating because you were freezing. But they got it down and we got out of there and all of us survived. Well, then they had another deal. They had a tank that looked like a farm silo, and it's a tower, and it's probably as big around as this room, or a little bigger maybe, and sticks up in the air 100 feet. And on the sides of it, well, there's one right at the bottom, which would be 100, and they fill it full of water. They're full of water. Bags kept full of water all the time. And you can go in this entry down here at the 100-foot level, but they didn't have us do that. They had us go up the ladders, and there was one at 75 feet, one at 50 feet from the top, one at 25 feet from the top. Hatches that you could go in, enter into the water. And so they put us on the 50-foot one so that we had to go up through 50 feet of water to get to the surface. And so it's just a little compartment that held about 4 guys, and it's built right onto the side of this tower. And there's a hatch that you open up and go in, and then shut the hatch tight again. Then you open up this hatch that goes out into the tower. Now when you do, water starts running into your little cubicle here, but it only gets up to your chest because the air pressure is holding it, any more of it from getting in there. Just holds it at that level. Now these guys knew before we went in there that that's the way it worked. They wouldn't have put us in there and said, golly, I hope that water doesn't rise too high and drown those guys. We had one of them in there with us, one of the trainers, but it ran up about to our chest. Now they had us put on the mumps and lung. It's kind of like a gas mask, but it clipped onto your nose, and you had a thing that went into your mouth because you're going to breathe through your mouth. And you'd close your mouth tight on it, and it was then canister on the front of it. Well, it wasn't a canister, it was a bag. It was a canvas bag with rubber lining probably. And so the guy when it was your turn, well, when they got the water level up, it had just like the valve stem on a car, a tire, was coming out of this thing. So he'd take the air thing and he'd shoot it into there, and it would puff up like this. And so you had air in there that you're gonna now breathe. So you weren't breathing in and out like you do. The air wasn't escaping like it does out of a diving suit that you're going down, whether it be hard hat or just regular scuba diving, while you're losing the air. You don't lose it out of the lung. You breathe it right back into there. And there's chemical in there, I don't remember what it was, carbon or something, that takes the carbon dioxide out of the air so that when you breathe it back again, you're still getting good air. And so as soon as he blows that up, now you duck your head and there's a rope that's coming, you see it, what you see of it, it's coming down and it's tied right outside of your hatch here, tied to a handle there, a steel handle that's welded on. And you can just see this rope's there and it's going up. And it has knots in it every so often. And it's a good sized rope, bigger than my thumb. And so you duck your head under there now and start breathing through the lung, because you're underwater. Hang onto this rope and let yourself go up to the surface slowly. You're not pulling yourself up there, you're holding yourself down, is what you're doing. If you just turned loose, you'd just shoot up to the surface. And that might be the end of your career as anything. So you let yourself up, and they had these knots every so often, so they told you, now hold on, go up to the next knot, and then stop, and wait for count to 30 or whatever, 30 seconds or so, and then go on up to the next knot, stop and count, and then go on gradually get to the top. And I thought that was real easy. But there were 2 or 3 of the guys that when they got down into there and they saw what they're going to have to do, they wouldn't do it. They chickened out. And so once you let the 4 guys out, once the trainer gets your 4 guys out, one at a time, you've got, these guys must be porpoises up there because they didn't even have masks or anything on. They were swimming clear down there at 25, 30 feet. And so they're down there watching you to see that you're not in trouble as you're going up. And so these guys, I probably could have done that job as well as I swam, but these guys were really good swimmers, and they're down there checking you out, be sure you're okay. They'd tap you on the hand or on the arm and nod their head or whatever. And if you were in trouble, why, you'd probably grab a hold of them. And so they'd calm you down and ease you up. But I couldn't see anybody I didn't do that, and neither did anybody that I saw there. But I did see a couple of guys back out, and so they wouldn't go. And so when you finish the 4, or even if you have one that won't go, at that point you close that hatch again that goes out into the tank, and then you drain that water out of there. This has a tube, and he opens a valve, and it drains this water that was up to your chest, drains it clear down to the floor. Now you can open this outside hatch and get out of there and go back down the stairs. And so these guys that didn't chickened out, why, they had to go back down that way. And I don't know what happened to them, whether they gave them another chance or what they did.
They were the ones that were shot.
But anyway, I went up through that thing. Now what they've learned is that you don't need that mumps and lung. If you'll just take a deep breath of air and get out there on that rope and just exhale slowly, just exhale slowly as you go up, you can go up 100 feet of water. You don't need that lung to breathe in and out. Just let the air out as you're going up, because you don't want to get to the surface and have all that air in you. You might pop. So anyway, that's something they learned. But at that time, we thought we had to have that on us. And it was it's like a baby blanket. It was kind of security. If they'd have said, duck out of there and just hold your breath, I might have said,
Well, if you
no,
held
wait
your
a
breath,
minute.
you couldn't have stopped for 30 seconds at every knot.
That's right.
Anyway, that was
You would have tried.
that was one of the things that we had to do. And another one, let's see, we had the air tank, the swimming, the tower. They had a psychiatrist or psychologist or somebody who pretended to be one of those to talk to us. And he asked us a bunch of dumb questions. Would you do this in these circumstances? Would you do that? And sometimes I said, I don't think that's a very sensible question to be asking somebody. I'm a married man. Why would you be asking me something like that? But anyway, they were just trying to get your reaction. It's see if you're going to blow your stack over to do something. They're trying to be sure they get guys that are going to be calm and be able to handle the situations. Well, then they decided my tonsils had to come out. Well, I had my tonsils out when I was about 5 years old, but they'd grown back in. Now, I knew this because I was in high school and went to see Dr. McCartney because my throat was swollen, and he told me, hey, your tonsils have grown back in. He knew I'd had them out. And so anyway, I went into the hospital for 2 weeks there, and they took my tonsils out. And so I get all these things done, and then when it was time for me to start classes, why I started with all these other guys. Now in my class, it was like typical classroom size room, about 6 or 7 seats in a row, down this row, and about that many here, so that there were about 30 guys in the class. And some of these guys were second-class petty officers. They were guys that had been on aircraft carriers, applied for sub-school, guys that, one of the guys been on the Vincennes when it was sunk down there in the South Pacific. And he was a gunner's mate first class, but he'd requested submarines, so he was there at sub-school. We weren't all boots out of boot camp. Probably not even half of us were guys right out of boot camp. Most of the guys were guys who had Navy experience. So anyway, we started our class, and they had some old retired chief petty officers. Guys had been submariners, but had been retired from the Navy. And they called them back to run the school, not to man submarines, but to run the school. And so here we had a guy named McLaren who was in charge of the class. And then these 5 rows of guys, each had a chief over them. And I can't even remember what my individual chief's name was, but I can remember McLaren, the chief that was the chief of the chiefs. And the first day we were in that class, Bud Cooley was in there with me. And Bud lived up in Springfield, Massachusetts, where he grew up. And he and I liked to shoot pool, only he was good at it and I wasn't. And so you'd go in the pool room there in the base, and you'd get in line, and whoever's playing, the loser, they have to get out, and then the next one in line can play. As long as you're winning, you kept playing. And so when it'd be our turn, we'd get in there to play. Well, whatever I did didn't matter much, because Cooley, he could run all 15 balls, and the other guys never even get a turn anyway. He really was good. But he had a pool table in his home, in his basement. He said, I don't remember when my dad got that. I was so little. So I've been playing this game all my years of growing up. And so I liked him for a partner because I got to stay. Sometimes I got a shot. He'd leave one for me. But it was fun. But anyway, McCooley was and he just died here about a year ago or less. I saw it in the Sub-Vets magazine, he died. But Cooley had grown up there in Springfield, and his priest, he was Catholic, and his priest was Father Murphy. Now, you wouldn't expect a Catholic priest to be named Father Murphy, would you? But that's what his name was.
Yeah.
And he was in the Navy now as a chaplain, and he was there at some school. And one day Cooley said to me, hey, when we were eating lunch, he said, let's go over to and it was the recreation building, and he said, let's go over there and see Father Murphy. He said, he was my priest when I was growing up. in Springfield. So we went over there, we went in, sat down. Well, it was kind of fun. Father Murphy was a lieutenant, and we sat there and had a nice visit with him. And I didn't give him the first discussion, because at that time I didn't know what the first discussion was, but I knew I had a testimony of the gospel, but I couldn't, prove it to anybody. So anyway, we sat and had a nice visit with Father Murphy. And then we start our school just a day or two after that. And we get in that class, and McLaren gets up, the very first thing he gets up and he says, "Okay, you guys, now you're in here, you're not boys anymore, you're men. And I don't want to hear any whining or anything out of any of you. You don't belong in submarines if you can't really be a man." And I said, "We have some guys here who want to run over and see the chaplain. They want to go visit the chaplain about things. Well, I want to tell you something. You better not be over visiting the chaplain, because only sissies do that." And said, "Just stay away from the chaplains and you learn what we teach you here." And yeah, I mean, he really said some more things that were kind of caustic. And so the next time we got a chance, we went over to see Father Murphy. And we told Father Murphy what he said in there. And so Father Murphy said, "Would you be willing to tell that to Commander Palmer, who commands the school?" And I said, "Well, will he tell them that we told her?" They said, No, he'll want to talk to you about this. Would you do that?" And so I figured, well, he's cool, he's priest, he's not going to do anything to hurt us. So I said, "Okay, we will." So said, "All right, now come back here tomorrow after you eat, and he'll be here, and you tell him what's going on over there in that class." So we were there the next day, only Commander Palmer wasn't there. His wife was there. Now, his wife wasn't in the Navy, but they lived there on the base because he was the school commander. And she came in and she apologized for him not being able to be there, but he'd had something else that came up that he had to go be involved in. So she said, "He asked me to let you tell me what the problem is over there, and I'll relay that to him." And so I said, "Well, I'm a little bit nervous about this, because I know that those men over there have a lot of power." And she said, "Don't you worry about that. Commander Palmer has a lot more power than they do." So we told her what he said. And when we did, she thanked us and we left. And I don't remember, I think it was probably the next day, but it could have been that afternoon. A runner came in and he said, "Chief McLaren, Commander Palmer wants to see you over at his office." Well, we knew what this was about. And so Cooley is not in my row, but he's in the row next to me and just one seat up. I'm back on about the fifth. I wasn't on the back seat, but almost. And he's about in the middle of the row. So we can look at each other without much trouble. And so out goes McLaren. And he's gone for about an hour. And we're going ahead with our work. And pretty soon, in the door comes McLaren, and I mean, you could tell this guy was madder. I mean, these killer bees, they just have lovable personalities compared to that guy when he came in that room. He was ready to kill all of us, to be sure he got the right guy. And so he didn't. He just came through the door, and one of the chiefs was up doing some stuff on the chalkboard, and he just said, "Stop what you're doing, I have something to say." Said, "One of you in here went over to the chaplain and told him what I said the first day of class," which was only 4 or 5 days after that. And he said, "I'm going to find out who that was, and I'll guarantee you he'll never serve on a submarine. I'll guarantee you that." And he said, "But I'll find out who you are." Well, now the class was going to run for 5+ more weeks. And so every day we're coming in that class, we're wondering, well,
Is he
When's the hammer gonna fall? And so he didn't say any more about it, but his disposition, maybe it was always that bad, but it was certainly bad. And it was clear up, and so we kept going back to the chaplain, because he was a nice guy to visit with. I enjoyed sitting in there visiting with him. We didn't talk religion. We just talked about things that interested us, and why we're in the Navy, and whatever else. And so it was fun talking to him, and it's fun to talk to a high-ranking officer anyway, a little flunky like us. So, anyway, it was the last day of class. And I'd done a good job in that class. You saw my book, and it looked like a third grader did it, but it was accurate. My workbook, I have one of these college books that they give you to write final exams.
Just like the spelling.
But anyway, I had the diagrams of an O-boat and all the parts in there, all the compartments.
You still have that book somewhere.
Yeah, I still have it. And so anyway, he got up there and he says, I finally found out who it was that went to the chaplain. Now, I hadn't said anything about this from the time he came in, and then all these weeks had passed and he never mentioned it. But he came and he said, I found out who it was, and he's looking right at me. And I thought, uh-oh, what's going to happen now? And so he says, I didn't get you. I'd have got you sooner, and you'd have been out of here. But I didn't find out till just now. So you're going to have to go on to another training class, and we'll take care of it. You won't ever be on a submarine. I didn't point at me, but he was looking at me. Now Cooley, this was his priest, but Cooley's just sitting there cool as cucumber, because apparently he doesn't know that Cooley had anything to do with it. And I wondered if he might have sent somebody down there and posted them there to see who went in and out of the chaplain's office. I don't know how he found out, but he really made it clear that I'd had it. And so I thought, wow.
Was it sometime in the middle of all this that those girls invited you guys out to dinner? Those high school girls invited you out?
Well,
Or
some
was that later?
but that was just, they were, yeah, or.
We'll mention that just because of the comment with the girls.
There was a graduation in one of the high schools there. And the guys were all gone to the service. There wasn't hardly any guys in that senior class. And they invited some of the sailors to just come out to the graduation as their guests, and then they were going to have refreshments, and then they even had a dance there afterwards. So Cooley and I and several of the other guys went out there and had the refreshments, the dance. Yeah, that was, they were always doing that sort of thing, inviting us to people's homes.
But when she found out you were a Mormon, that's the...
Yeah. Oh, well, that was in the USO where I told him I was a Mormon. And that was up in Portsmouth later. But, so anyway, I went back to the chaplain first chance I got, because the following Monday, this was Friday, following Monday I was supposed to start in sound school. Now Cooley was striking to be a motor machinist, so he was going to go to a different school, still there on the base. But I was going to sound school, learn how to operate sound gear and all that. So I get over to the sound school the Monday morning, and we're all in there seated, and Chief Ford, who was champion boxer for the different parts of the Navy at various times, he was an old-timer. He'd retired from the Navy probably 10 years before. But I mean, he was just tougher than a boot. He just looked like a guy that could beat your head in 2 minutes. Just really looked tough, even though he might have been 50 years old. Anyway, Ford looked and he says, "Who is Harris?" Now here's this classroom full of guys, it's probably 30 of us. Who is Harris? Well, I thought he needed some information or something, so I stood up and started to walk up there, and he said, no, just get back in your seat. I just wanted to know who you are. And I thought, uh-oh, McLaren's been in touch with him. And so here's my next hurdle I've got to get over. This guy's going to ride me, except that McLaren didn't know who I was till the end, so I'd got through all the work. This guy's got me at the start, and so he's got 4 weeks to just nail me to the floor. So I went back to the chaplain, and he said, I talked to Commander Palmer, and you don't have a thing to worry about. He says, Commander Palmer is guaranteeing that you will go through these schools, that you will go to a submarine, just don't worry about it. I wondered if he'd written something, put it in my record, because you're going to all different places. He said, just don't worry. He'll guarantee that you're okay. They're not going to get you, so don't worry about it. Well, I go through this 4-week class, and remember, I told you I took that radio class in high school, and there were a number of things about sound gear. They're really a radio kind of a thing. And so I knew I'd answer some of these questions. And I think it was maybe the 2nd or 3rd day, he asked me something that nobody in that class would have known. In fact, I'm not sure I knew it after we got through the 4 weeks. He asked me something, and I said, I don't know. Oh, I thought you were a smart guy. I thought you knew everything. Pointing at me like, and what he was trying to do is get me mad. And I said, well, I don't know everything. And I stayed in my seat. But he did this kind of thing over and over and over again in those 4 weeks. He was just constantly trying to get me to bow my back and tell him off or whatever. And then he could say, this guy was insubordinate and get him out of here. Well, he didn't know that Palmer had guaranteed me. So now I finished that 4 weeks, and the last day of school, that last class on a Friday, the guys are picking up their papers and their final grades and whatever. And he said to me as I went to go out, he kept mine till last. So everybody else had theirs and were out the door. And then he said to me, well, I tried to get you, but I didn't make it, but somebody else will. They'll get you. You won't serve in a submarine. And so I said, well, okay. I hope you're wrong, or something like that. And I went on. Now, the following Monday, I went to night lookout school. And that was a 2-week course. And I mean, we learned to identify ships by silhouettes, like and they had some really good stuff there for that long ago. And you're looking there in the dark, total dark. Now there's a flash, which is like a gun, like the big guns went off. And here's a ship in front of that flash, so that you just, for an instant, you see the silhouette of it. And is it an aircraft carrier? Is it a cruiser? Is it a battleship? Is it whatever it is? Well, you learn to identify those ships and even different classes of the Japanese carriers, and you learn to identify them in that 2 weeks. And I guess I did pretty well, but I never heard a word from any of the chiefs I worked with there. Not one of them ever even gave me a hint that they even knew about what was going on. They were just really nice guys to work with. So now I get out of there, and now my orders say you go to Key West, Florida, to the R-11, submarine R-11. And so within a day or two, I had my stuff packed. A group of us got on, including Cooley, and several other guys that I'd been in class with and had got to know pretty well by this time. And so off we went on the train down to Miami, and went through Pittsburgh, and it was so smoky you couldn't hardly see out the train window. I mean, in those days, there wasn't any pollution regulations. Boy, Pittsburgh was just one mass of smoke, and the steel mills and all that stuff. We get down to Miami, and then we get off the train, we get on a bus. And this train we went on down there was World War I cars, train cars. They had these bunks in there that were just made out of wood, and well, they were just old antique trains, but they had to use everything that they could find that would work, because we had so much going on that you needed every locomotive that had run, every car that could roll. But we got down there okay and took the bus. And I don't know if you've ever paid attention to this, but from Miami to Key West is just a string of islands. And some of them aren't any bigger than this house, and some of them are 50 or 100 acres, or probably the one where the Marine Air Station was, probably a square mile, probably 640 acres or more. But all size islands. And years ago, when back during the Spanish-American War or somewhere in there, they'd build a railroad track running from Miami over each of these islands, bridge in the gaps, had a railroad track running all the way down to Key West. I think about 90 miles it is from Miami to Key West. And there's just the bridges going to each one of these little islands. Well, they had taken the trains off of there somewhere in the 1930s and took the rails out and blacktopped it or fixed it, so now it was for car traffic. So the bus we went on drove down that, and it's just 2 lanes. I don't think the thing's any wider than from here to the door over there. But, because it didn't need to be for a train, but cars, when the bus passed cars, they were close. But anyway, we rode down there on a bus. And while I was there, I was assigned immediately to the 08, and we'd go out in the daytime and submerge, but we wouldn't stay out at night. We'd come in every night.
This was a training sub that you were...
Yeah, it was a training sub. Yeah. And we'd been, when we were at submarine school, every week of those 6 weeks, we went out on the 08. Now, it was even older than the R-11 boats. It was like a World War I boat. The R boats had been built in 1920, 21, 22. So anyway, I served a month there, and then my orders came to go to Portsmouth, New Hampshire for new construction. Now, the words new construction are the dream of every submarine sailor. Maybe destroyers and others, I don't know. But new construction means you're getting a brand new submarine, and it's going to have all the latest innovations on it. It's going to have everything. It's going to be able to go deeper than any of the subs before it. It's going to be better. It's going to have radar. It's going to have all these things on it. And that's what my orders said. So boy, was I ever happy. And got back on the bus and up to Miami and back on the train and went to Portsmouth.
Well, you flew on the B-25 though when you were down at Key West.
Yeah, and while we were down to Key West, I had never been in the air in an airplane before, never. And so we left the base, because you could do that. We had paths and they didn't stop you. Well, not many guys were going to go 90 miles to Miami. We just told them we were going up to the next island to the Marine Air Base. And so we just hitchhiked, I think, as far as I can remember. We just got out there, and there was officers and others going back and forth. We got a ride over to the island, maybe 5, 6 miles away, and went in and told them that, is there some way we can take a ride in one of your planes here? And they had B-25s. And so they said, well, yeah, you probably can. We were in uniform, so it was, they were sailors. And so they said, we've got some guys that are going out in just a little while, and they probably won't mind if you get in there. So we went out the flight line, and there were these guys with the B-25s. So we talked to them, and they let us in. So we sat down in the bombardier's seat. They're not bombardiers because they were dropping bombs. Maybe in the navigator's seat or whatever, because they just were flying around. They didn't need a navigator. And anyway, we rode out there, and what they were doing, what they were doing was bombing with water bombs a simulated ship. And what they had was a speedboat and a long line coming back from it, probably at least 100 yards long. And then they just had this V built like this, just a V shape, so it was being pulled through the water, and it made a wake just like a ship would. And so the guys in the B-25s were to dive down and drop their bombs and try to hit in that V, or at least close by, somewhere in the wake. and so we had a plane ride. And it was kind of fun because they partially dived. They didn't do like dive bombers like this, but they went down it pretty steep. And then they'd pull up and drop the bombs, and it pressed you down in your seat pretty good. And so anyway, that was it, first plane ride ever, and it was really quite interesting. I thanked them for letting us do that. And but you could see everything under the water. The water is shallow out in that area around the Keys. You could see down in there, you could see porpoise, see all kinds of things, stuff that'd been sunk down in there. You just like there wasn't any water there at all. You could see right through it and see the bottom so clearly, because probably it wasn't more than 40 or 50 feet deep in much of that area. Anyway, we did that, and then of course we went, when our month was up, and we got orders to report to Portsmouth, why we went back on the train and from the bus and then back on the train and up to Portsmouth. And we get up there, and they just launched the Tigrone just a few days before. So now they had it around, tied up, and it was in the water, but tied up alongside of a barge. And the barge was tied up to the dock. And the big flat barge had a house over it. And so they had kind of a machine shop inside that barge in that house.
And they launch them as soon as they can float. They don't launch them when they're done, because they can start another boat then.
Yeah, that way they could start another boat immediately. Like, as soon as this thing was completed to float, and they put the engines and that huge stuff down in there before they welded the top shut. But there was still a lot of small stuff that could be taken in now, the hatches, that had to be installed, a lot of pipe work and stuff. The conning tower wasn't even on there when I first saw it. And then they swung that, they built that over on the bank in a shop. And one of the cranes brought it over and swung it over and set it down on there, and then they welded it all around. So I got to see them do a lot of the work on this thing. And when one of the officers would say, we need somebody to stand fire watch down on the boat, because the boat meant our boat. There were the boats all around there, but the boat meant ours. And I'd say, I'll do it. So I'd take the extinguisher, had one of these hand extinguishers, and I'd go down in there. And they'd say, here, I want you to be by this. These workmen now are all civilians. And somebody would say, well, stick close by him because he's going to be doing welding down there, electric welding. So I would, but I'm asking questions. What are those pipes that you're putting in there? What's they going to carry? And they'd tell me, these are hydraulic lines that are going to go back to the steering or to the stern planes, whatever. And so I got a lot of information on what everything was that they were doing, because I kept volunteering to go down in there and watch and be there with them. And so by the time that boat was finished, you could point to any pipe on that thing, and there'd be a dozen of them running down the overhead there, and I could tell you what every one of them had in them, and which ones were air, which ones were hydraulic fluid, what they were, because I saw them put them in there. And that really paid off when I had to qualify them, which every submarine man does, has to do what they call qualified as a submariner. And you have 6 months to do that from the time you go aboard. And if you haven't done it in 6 months, you're transferred out to surface craft or the land base. They don't keep you. You have to qualify. And qualify means that you have a check sheet for each compartment. And so I'd go in that after engine room, and that engine man would say to me, "What's this line up here?" I'd tell him, "What's this one over here?" "Now, tell me what you'd do if I suddenly fell over here with a heart attack, and this engine's running, and they've just sounded the diving alarm." Well, obviously that engine can't run if you're diving. They can run nuclear ones, but they can't run diesel engines. And so I'd tell him how I'd shut that engine down and what I would do. And when you convinced him that you really knew what was going on in that compartment and that in an emergency you could handle it, then he signs you off on that compartment. And then you go to another one. "Okay, now tell me the horsepower of these two motors." I'd tell him. "Who made them?" "General Electric." "Okay, how big's the shaft that's going out of the back of the motor here to the props?" I'd tell him. I saw all that stuff while they're working on it, and I'm asking all these questions down there. And so I was the seventh man. Now there are 88 guys on that boat, and I was the seventh man to qualify. And a lot of those guys had been on several, some of them 3 or 4 different submarines. But you have to qualify again on when you move to another submarine, unless it's the same class. In other words, built that same group. Why, you don't have to requalify if you're on one of the same class. But any other, why, you have to qualify, even if you've qualified 4 times before on other boats. And here I was, the 7th guy to qualify, because I was down there holding that fire extinguisher and asking questions. So anyway, that's what happened there, and we got the thing in commission, and that was about the 15th of October, somewhere in October, I've forgotten, 23rd, I guess it was, 23rd of October. So I'd been there from the end of July till October, by the time they got all that work finished and the boat was commissioned.
You've now been in the Navy a year, a little over a year.
Yeah, been in just over a year. And then we took it out for shakedown. And while we were out, and mind you, we had a few torpedoes on there, but I'm not sure we had exploders on any of them. We'll see you, Rich. Thanks for coming by.
All right.
We had hardly any ammunition or anything. We were out off the coast of Portsmouth there, and we were submerged, and we picked up propellers on our sound gear. And there weren't supposed to be any other boats out there. And so we listened, and they decided, some of the old timers that had heard lots of different sounds on sound gear, determined this was a German submarine that was submerged somewhere around us there. Well, you won't fire a torpedo at a submerged submarine. You wouldn't do that, because there's too much chance that something will go haywire. The thing will do a circle run and hit you, or if he's down there, it's going to go over the top of him anyway. And besides, you can't see him, so you can't tell exactly where to fire it. So you don't even talk about, let's shoot at that sound over there. You just don't even discuss that at all. And so, but here he is. And so we're moving around, and he's following us around, and so we don't have anything to fight him with. We're out there on a shakedown. And so finally, we get to where we think we're away from him, and that he's out to sea from where we are. We're closer to the land. And so the skipper gives orders to surface all power. It's flank speed, when flank is everything, including the auxiliary engine. There's a little auxiliary that's about like a huge semi-truck engine that's there for small chillers. And then these 4 huge diesel Fairbanks, Morris, rather, diesel engines. Anyway, we surfaced, and I mean, we took off as fast as we could run for the harbor. and men were on the radio, just radio man was on there just as soon as we hit the surface. And he's on telling them where we are and that there's a German submarine right here. And so we didn't get halfway. We were probably, well, in travel time, maybe an hour from getting into the harbor where we knew we'd be safe. And so we're running as fast as we can. Well, it wasn't 20 minutes till here came some planes out over us, Navy planes. And they were heading out there to see if they could find this guy. And then right behind them, here came a couple of surface ships, the one destroyer and one DE, heading out there. And we just waved and kept on running as fast as we could.
With no ammunition, yeah,
Because
you want to join
because
the
if
fight.
they'd have fired a torpedo, they still might have been able to hit us, even though we were running away from them. Well, we never did find out just whether they got this guy or what happened. But we went on Liberty that night, and they'd said, now, keep your mouth shut. Don't be telling anything about what happened to us. Okay, I can do that. I'd like to live. I don't want to give secrets to the enemy. And I'm over in town, and this guy walks up and he says, aren't you on the Tyrone? And I said, yeah. Hey, I heard the German submarine came tracking you guys out there. Oh, really? I'm trying to act like what you talking about. But they already knew all about it, telling us to not say anything, and these guys already knew it. Anyway, that was an interesting experience to shake those guys off and at least get out of there with them not sinking us. Because once you come to the surface, now you're a target for him. And so anyway, we made it. Well, and a few more shakedowns, and they didn't send us out anymore after that without an escort with us. They'd have a destroyer or PE or a sub-chaser out there with us, right, paying attention to us wherever we went. But then when we got everything done there, we went down the coast to Newport, Rhode Island, pulled into there. And that's the place where I'm one of the few submariners that every sub ever got hit with a torpedo. And I'm still around to tell about it. And that was that we were tied up to the dock. And they had some nets in this good-sized harbor there, and a Navy base. And we would fire torpedoes, and they'd catch them in a net, big net that they had down at the end. Now, the heads on the torpedoes were full of water. They weren't full of powder. But we could do some short-range firing there to be sure our tubes and everything worked properly. But one day, I'm down below, we're tied up at the dock, and I hear wham, really loud, wham. That came from right through the bulkhead there. So we climb up topside, and what had happened was one of the other boats had fired a torpedo, and it had run erratic. And it made a turn and came around and hit us midships. Just right smack dab in the galley area. And so anyway, they got a diver over there real quick, probably within an hour or two. And he went down and checked, and it didn't do any damage to us. Then he went on down, there was the torpedo down there on the bottom, and just the nose just smashed in where it hit us. So they got a boat over there, and they lowered a hook and picked it up and took it back to the torpedo shop to salvage whatever they could out of it.
Did you get to see it? Did you actually see the torpedo when they
Oh,
pulled
yeah,
it?
yeah, and the nose was all smashed in on it.
When did you break your foot?
Well, that happened at New London when I was in school, before I started school. That was during those days when I was cleaning barracks and that. And we got up in the morning and we were getting ready to go to breakfast. And we were in a dorm up on the hill. And it had a trail going down this hill. I mean, it wasn't really clear walkways, just kind of trails going down. Or you could go on the road if you wanted to walk a couple 100 yards farther to go around. Well, we were cutting down this trail, And I decided that I could even shorten it more than that by just getting off the trail a little ways and go right straight down to the chow hall. But I stepped on a rock, and it probably could have been as big as an egg, with the side of my foot. It was right under this side of my foot, and I stepped on that as I was kind of jumping, running. And boy, that pain just shot through me. I mean, it really pain. I knew I'd broken something. And so I went on to chow, but then I told one of the guys there that I was going over to sick bay and to tell him, Spritz's yeoman, that the reason I wasn't there was I was over at sick bay. I'd injured my foot. And so he did that, but I went over to the doctor. And so the doctor we took my shoe off, and I had on Navy shoes, so they had leather soles and leather shoes, but low cuts. And took he pressed on my foot under there, and finally he said, "Oh, I just think you sprained something." I said, "It feels like it's broken." And he said, "Well, I don't think so." And so he gave me he said, "But there's a cane in here that if it's bothered you, why don't you take that cane?" And of course, I didn't want to miss my school because I was getting close to the time when my classes would begin. And if I missed the start, then I had to wait 8 more weeks. So I didn't argue with him. When he said that, I said, "Okay." And I took the cane. But boy, it just kept hurting and hurting, but I just didn't do any. I just went ahead and toughed it out and got into school, and it gradually the pain went away. I mean, after a couple of weeks, the pain pretty well subsided, and then I didn't do anything more about it. Now that was in.
Did you get the Army boots and wear those?
Yeah, that was in. Let's see, about maybe March or probably April when that happened. Now it's a lot of things have happened. I've gone through the sub school. I've gone through all these other schools. I've been to Key West. I'm back up to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, on the Tigrone, but it's not finished yet. Now we're into September, and so we're gone to April to September with this foot, no medical attention at all to it, but it's not hurting. We were out playing a softball game there one afternoon in September. They didn't commission, we commissioned the boat in October. Okay, we're out there playing a softball game. I get up and I got a really good hit. And I'm running to first base, and as I stepped on first base with this foot to turn, because it would have been a home run, because it was really out there. Stepped on first base with the side of this foot, and boy, that pain shot through there, and I knew I'd sprained something. But I still kept running, but when I got to second base, I stepped on that base with this side of this foot, and it was just like it's broken again. I mean, I just had to stop and sit down there. I couldn't even stand up my feet. Both of them just hurt so much. And so the guys, I don't remember what they did. They didn't have a runner finish my run or whatever. But I said to these guys, "I've broken something here." And so right across the street from the ball field was the dental offices. And I'd been over there for my teeth checkup when it'd been my turn to go over there. And so, see, we're up at Portsmouth. We're not down in New London. And so I went over there. Well, the dentist had me put my foot up, and he x-rayed my foot with a dental x-ray. And he said to me, "Well, you've got to go over to the hospital. You have a broken foot there." And so an ambulance came and got me and took me over to the hospital. Well, these guys that were playing ball with me, then later one of them came over, or some of them came over, probably 7. But anyway, I had them go back to my locker and bring me my stuff that I needed over there. And they brought it, and they put me in a bed in the hospital. And they asked me, "Now, what happened here? did you just break that now? That looks like it's an old break. And I told him what had happened up at New London when I ran down that hill. And that doctor just felt it and said, well, here, just use this cane. Well, the next thing I knew, here comes the captain. This guy is a horse driver. He's in charge of that whole hospital. He comes in my room, sits down there by the bed. Now, this is all the same day or the following morning. And he says, tell me what happened at New London. I heard you injured your foot at New London. And I told him, and he said, and that doctor just felt your foot, didn't x-ray it, didn't do anything else? I said, no, that's all he did. Loaned me a cane. Could you remember his name? And I said, well, no, I can't. Well, can you tell me what he looks like? Can you describe him to me? He said, this is the worst practice of medicine I've ever seen, or made some statement like he was really mad. And he says, and I said, well, you know, I just did what he told me, but he said, well, that foot was broken all this time. Said, and then he said, well, later we'll show you the x-rays and you can see that it was broken. And so you've been walking around on a broken foot all this time. But that was one mad officer. But I couldn't help him. I didn't know what the guy's name was. I'd seen too many people to remember how to describe him. But I'm not too sure that he didn't send for the medical records at New London and ferret that out and see who I saw. But anyway, so he said, well, the only thing we can do for you, we're going to have to operate, and we're going to have to scrape the surfaces on where that bone's been broken, and so we can put it back together so it'll grow back. Because it's not going to grow back now. It's been broken so long that the ends where the breaks are have built up, whatever he called it, and they won't heal now unless we scrape those surfaces and fit them back together. And I said, oh, don't do this to me. I said, the Tigrone is ready to go in commission, and we're getting ready to go out, and I've waited and waited for this opportunity. Don't do this, or I'll be here in the hospital for a month. And he said, yeah, you probably will be. And I said, no, please. I mean, I was really pleading with him. Probably had a terror in my eye. And so I talked that doctor into letting me, he said, well, what you need then is a good heavy shoe. And these Navy shoes are not heavy enough to, he said, you need a shoe that when you lace it up, it's just like a cast. And he says, now, there's an Army base right across the river here. And I knew where it was. And he said, I'll let you out of here. But he said, just as soon as you can, you carefully get on a bus and you get over there and you buy a pair of high-top Army shoes. And you lace those things up tight, and so that there's no way that there's going to be any movement in those bones. And he said, we'll see what happens. And I said, well, if it hasn't healed up by the time I get to Hawaii, I don't know why I picked out Hawaii, but I said, when we get to Pearl Harbor, why, if it hasn't healed, then I'll do whatever we have to do. But I don't want to miss this boat. By golly, I talked him into it. The next day, he checked me out of the hospital, and I went over and got those Army shoes, and I wore those. Now, when I went on liberty, I didn't wear them. I wore the Navy shoes. But otherwise, I wore them all the time. And in fact, I had those shoes clear till I was out to Hawaii. I still had them. And on the ship, I always wore them. And so I get to Hawaii, and they send us all to have a physical exam before we go out on a war patrol. They don't want anybody going out that's about to have appendicitis or something. So I went over there, and so I said to the guy, oh, he's looking at my medical record, this corpsman, and they're going to do some things. And I said, by the way, I broke this foot. If you look in there, you'll see the record on it. Broke this foot, and I don't know if it's healed up right or not. I said, the pictures I saw, the bones were touching on one edge, but they were apart like a V there, it was open. And so he said, well, okay, let's x-ray it. He x-rayed it, it was healed up perfectly. He really had to look and look and look to even find where the line was in there. It just healed up totally. So, and I've never had any more trouble with it. But I sure was talking like a Dutch uncle to get that captain to not hold me, but don't keep me here in the hospital. I may never get another submarine if you do that. And so all through the war, and the rest of the time, I never heard anything about going to the chaplain. I didn't know if maybe none of my guys on there knew any of those chiefs over there or not. And not until I told you I got to had that run-in with Chief Mixon. And Chief Mixon might have known those guys. He'd been in the Navy several years.
When you went up and talked to Ford and pointed down at the boat that was down there.
Well, yeah, that's true. When we went to Portsmouth and all that other stuff and came down the coast then to Rhode Island, and then we came into New London. And again, I shouldn't have done this, but when we were tied up there in New London, this sparkling new submarine, just, I mean, they're so beautiful alongside of the others. And I went up the hill to the sound school. I should have just let well enough alone, but I went up there. And he was having class, and it was about time for the students to get out, so I waited outside. When the students came out, then I walked into the room, and he's standing there, and I said, "You remember me?" It's like smart aleck. It's a wonder he didn't knock all my teeth out right then, as rough as mean as he was. He said, "Yeah, I remember you." And I said, "Remember you told me I'd never get on a submarine?"